Okay, Rick Lynch, another longtime skyscraper, probably a charter. Skyscraper.
1969.
1960. Oh my gosh, jeez. Okay, and here is the title of his talk. So please give a warm skyscraper welcome.
Thank you, everyone. This talk is a little bit about synchronicity. I went out and met up with Bob Horton's family. We went to a house he had rented in Nunda, New York, which is south of Rochester, and all the prospects were really good to see the eclipse there. But as fate would have it, with almost 100,000 people in Rochester, we got out of town when we realized that we weren't going to see it because of the clouds. I headed to Vermont, and Bob headed to Vermont and the Canadian border, and we were both pretty successful. But prior to the eclipse, okay, a comet that was visible in the western sky was Comet Pons-Brooks. I don't know how many people saw Comet Pons-Brooks. It was visible in the western sky to the naked eye, and I guess the first or second night, Bob was in Nunda with his family. We were staying a little bit farther away in a little bit bigger town, but we would meet up with him. He was able to see the comet, and I knew the approximate azimuth of where the comet was at, just after sunset. So that was important because I communicated that after. But W.R. Brooks was what happened was, I wanted to go to see the Smith Observatory, and this was the home of William Robert Brooks, who was one of the most prolific comet hunters of the 1800s, early 1900s. Only Pons in France had more observations, had more comet discoveries. And it was ironic that here we are out for the eclipse, and I'm going to W.R. Brooks Observatory, where he made a lot of his comet discoveries, and Comet Pons-Brooks is in the sky. And so that was kind of a little bit of synchronicity, but there seemed to be a lot more synchronicity that happened during this, including the observatory itself and some of the things that happened. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about Brooks. Okay, this is going to be turned on. Here we go. Okay, for those of you who didn't see the Millennium Falcon comet that was visible, it wasn't visible for very long. It was in the western sky just after sunset. And if you look at it, it does look like the Millennium Falcon there. And you can see it was quite bright, and it was just rather unique that I wanted to get to this observatory. Now, Bob and I had planned to visit the observatory on our way out, but we ended up, pretty much getting to our respective sites first, and decided we would do it on the way back. I was able to do it on the way back. I had left on the Sunday. Bob had also left a little bit later, so he didn't have the time to see the observatory. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the observatory. Okay, which one?
It should be
Right button, right? I can give you mine. Do you still have a USB port available?
I can unplug that one. Plug yours.
Goes back here. Yep, working. Okay. William Brooks, he was born in Maidstone, England. His father was a Baptist minister, so he had somewhat of a privileged life. He was well educated. They had a nice library and everything else. And when he was a very, very young boy, his father encouraged him to observe the natural world, and he became interested in looking at the stars. What happened was, just prior to becoming a teenager, his family took a trip to Australia. And on the trip to Australia, he was inspired by the navigator on board the sailing ship who was taking sextant readings every single day, noontime, throughout the day and everything else. And he was enamored with this. And he spent a lot of time, and he learned more about the stars and what have you. And this was the next great inspiration he had. What happened was when they returned home from Australia, the family settled. They didn't go back to England. They actually settled in Darien, New York, and this was in 1857 when they settled in Darien, New York. In 1858, the grandest comet of the 19th century, Comet Donati, was in the sky, and this made an incredible impression on him. And he decided that he read up on comets and how they're discovered and what have you, and he decided that this was something that he wanted to pursue. This is Brooks as a young man, and he is employed as a draftsman in Buffalo, New York, at the Shepherd Iron Works, and he's employed as a draftsman, and he designs very large equipment for the I think the furnace industry, what have you. Well, what happened was he got married in 1870, and him and his wife. They settled in Phelps, New York, okay, not far away, a little farther south. And in Phelps, New York, he had also learned, because he was interested in optics, he had learned photography, and he became the town photographer in Phelps, New York. So that's how he employed his family. He was a village photographer. At this point, he decides he's going to build his first telescope, and it's a 2-inch f/18 refractor that he uses to look at the night sky. But he soon realizes that this scope is very restricted field with long focal length, and he's interested in comets, and he builds a 5-inch f/10 reflector, okay? And with that 5-inch f/10, he discovers his first comet. And what's unique about the first comet was it was discovered 143 years ago today on October 4th, okay, in 1881 in the constellation of Leo. So 143 years ago to this date, he was out making his observation. Another synchronicity, which I thought was kind of interesting. Phelps, New York, of course, is where he settles. And in Phelps, New York, he sets up his first observatory, and it's called the Red House Observatory. And it's still marked today with a roadside sign. It's site of the Red House Observatory. 11 comets discovered here between 1881 and 1888 by international astronomer William Robert Brooks. Okay, and if I can just read this, it says in 1870, as an aspiring young astronomer located in Little Red House that once occupied the site, Dr. William R. Brooks, the village photographer, built what was no more than a small platform and a mounting post at the center of an apple orchard just east of the spot. He aptly named it Red House Observatory. It was just a very small little cottage he and his wife moved into. In October of 1881, with the third homemade telescope he had created, Dr. Brooks discovered his first comet. Over the next 7 years, he and the Red House Observatory would become internationally renowned, with the famed award-winning astronomer discover a total of 11 comets here alone and 27 over his prestigious career. This is his house. This was the little red house. And if you look here, this is where the observatory platform was. And of course, this is a very old photo. The house doesn't exist any longer, just a roadside sign as to where it was. And this is his observatory. this telescope that he built, okay, was let me see, it was a 10-inch reflector, and with this he discovered his 11 comets. You kind of take a look at it, looks a little bit like the Patton telescope, okay? It's altazimuth mounted and everything. Well, he's discovered all these comets, and back in the 1800s, there were philanthropists who they were generous in supporting the sciences, of which astronomy was one of the most interesting sciences that the public was in. They were, you know, we didn't have light pollution, what have you. The night sky was nice and dark. People would see events. So astronomy was very, very, very important to a lot of people. And there was a gentleman who was a patent medicine. He had a patent medicine business in Rochester, New York, and his name was where is it? I had to take notes because I wanted to make sure I had everything right. He was a wealthy patron of astronomy. H. Warner. The Warner. He is part of the Warner family of Warner and Swasey, but not the Warner of the design of Swasey. And he lived in Rochester, and Rochester is just north of Geneva, New York, in Phelps. And in this, he is offering for anybody who discovers a comet, he is offering $200, okay, as a gift. Now, in today's money, that's $2,800. So, believe it or not, Brooks was able to make a living by just discovering comets. And $2,800, you know, a loaf of bread cost 3 cents, 5 cents back then. So consequently, $2,800 went a long way. In one period of 5 months, he discovered 3 comets. Okay, so that gives you some idea of the kind of money he was generating.
Hey, Rick,
Yeah,
that scope doesn't look like it can see the zenith. It looks like the mirror which hits the ground. Am I not understanding it correctly?
he's using it for comet observing. It's altazimuth,
Yeah.
so he's really looking to the west and the east,
Okay,
probably
so
up to about 45 degrees.
He never used it to look at the zenith.
No, he really didn't, and this scope wasn't used for looking at double stars or galaxies. This was his comet scope,
Yeah.
okay? And it was good from the horizon to 45, and it was altazimuth because he wanted to sweep
Sure.
in that particular method. But eventually, he's going to evolve into a much better telescope. Well, there was another comet hunter in Rochester, New York, by the name of Lewis Swift, okay? And he was making money, okay, discovering comets, and they actually share a comet together. Well, what happened was, when in Phelps, New York, south of Rochester, Rochester's the big city, Phelps is a little podunk town, and what happened is there is another wealthy philanthropist who is in the landscaping and agronomy business, and he has an enormous complex in I forgot the name of the town. Geneva, New York. He's got an enormous complex in Geneva, New York. And he's reading in the newspapers, and he reads about this gentleman who's in the next town over, and he's discovering all these comets. And the guy in Rochester is the one who's making him a wealthy man and everything else. So he decides he wants to do something for this W.R. Brooks. And he says, listen, why don't you leave Phelps? And why don't you come to Geneva, New York? I'll build you a house and I'll build you an observatory, okay?
Wow.
And you can live for free in it, and you can keep collecting money from the guy up in Rochester, but you'll be living rent-free, and you'll have a beautiful home and everything else. I think if any one of you here were offered that option, you would definitely take advantage of it. So William Smith was an amateur astronomer, this philanthropist, and he was giving money to a number of scientific things. But one of the things was 2 small colleges, Hobart College and there was another college called Smith College. And they named it Smith College because he was one of the big benefactors to get the college up on its feet. In Hobart, he was involved in also as a benefactor. And at Hobart College, he actually built an observatory for them, okay, because he was an amateur astronomer. But he owns an enormous amount of land, and he wants Brooks to come and live, and he wants to be his benefactor. So Brooks decides to get up and move, and he definitely takes the bid. But the first comet that I told you that he discovered on this night, that long time ago, was this is paintings of Brooks' comet. And it was seen, it was about it got to about second magnitude. And ironically, synchronicity, we have another comet that around October 12th in the western sky, you're going to be able to see the new Atlas-Tushanin comet. So I encourage you all to look at it. But this is William Smith. He's a philanthropist and astronomer. He's also a spiritualist, and he's a woman's rights activist, and he's a nurseryman. And he made his living in the W.T.&E. Smith nurseries. And like I said, an enormous amount of land that he has. And he says to him, this is his home, okay? And thank you very much. For Brooks, he says, I'm going to build your house. So he builds him this house. And if you look very closely here, he builds him this observatory. This observatory is 17 feet in diameter, cylindrical, just like ours. It's 34 feet high, just like ours, okay? And it has an anteroom, but it also has a transit room, okay? And there's a lot of similarities to the building, and I think a lot of these buildings, and we're gonna see the Hobart Observatory, was built in a similar manner. So I think there was kind of a standard blueprint for wealthy amateurs to build their observatories. Well, this is a map, and this is Smith's home. And if you look here, here's his observatory, and there's the dome, there's the anteroom, but he's got a transit room. And he decides that he's going to have, he decided that he was going to offer Brooks a home, so he builds him this home, okay, and here's his observatory, okay, and then these are some of his, these are actually off the property, but these are like greenhouses, and he owns all the land, all the way out to here, an enormous amount of land. And this is the location on Castle Street. You can go to the location. And this is the first observatory he funded, Hobart Observatory. This had an 8 3/4 inch Fitz that was in it. And it was quite the observatory, but it was only in existence for 30 years. This is the observatory as the campus grew up, and you can see the observatory is right here. Here's the transit room. The anteroom is here. This is a little bit taller, but it's 17 feet in diameter, okay? And this was in existence from, it was built and completed in 1870, but it was only in existence until 1900, and then it was torn down. I guess at some point, I didn't follow up on this observatory, but I might check with John Briggs and find out if he's got the Fitz or where it went.
Yeah. Probably.
This is the house that Smith built for Brooks. This is the house today, and there's the observatory in the back. This is how it looked when it was built, and if you look here, here is an edge of evergreens, and all the land back here belongs to him. So it's on Lake Geneva, so it's got fantastic skies. It's very dark. We're talking the 1800s. Geneva is not a very big city. Of course, today it's much bigger, but back then it was pretty rural, and this was just offered to him if he would just come and let him be his patron. And this is Brooks in a little bit older, in later years, and this is his observatory. And if you look inside the observatory, you'll see a lot of similarities. They all have this tongue and groove, which is what we had in our observatory before it was all done over. This has a dome, whereas we have a cylindrical dome. And the telescope was a 10.5-inch f9, and he tried to contract with Alvin Clark to build it for him, but Alvin Clark declined and said it was too much of an undertaking because he wanted to be an f9 visual and photographic telescope. So what ended up happening, a local optician, okay, who I had never heard of, by the name of John Clancy, made this exceptional quality telescope. And Brooks said the quality of the objective and everything was just absolutely fantastic. The mountain dome were done by Warner and Swayze.
Rick, go back to that picture, because I'm curious about the dome support.
Yep.
It looks like wheels,
They are wheels.
but they seem to be connected to each other by pieces of pipe.
They had, and you'll see in the photos that I've taken, the current photos and everything else, this is the same type of construction that we have here. Instead of having the cannonball in the conduit wrapped into a circle, they have wheels, but they're all connected by conduit type pipe to stay in the circle. And it's in a the bottom track is a trough, but because it's a wheel, okay, it's rather wide and shallow as opposed to a ball, which would be in a more thing, but a lot of similarities to our observatory. If you go to the book, A Descriptive Catalog of Comets, you'll find that there are 30 comets that Brooks discovered. Of the 30 comets, he was not the 22 are fully accredited to him, and the other 8 he shared with other people, but prolific. And if you take just 22 comets at $2,800 a piece, that's a lot of money. Well, this is his comet that was discovered this is Comet Pons Brooks, the ones that we saw in the sky that were present when I was there. And these are drawings, and these were done by G.D. Alcock in England, the famous double star observer and comet hunter, who also discovered 4 comets on his own. So these are just some of the drawings, and these are drawings that are actually at the observatory. So I took a couple of pictures of those. Well, Brooks has become so well known throughout the astronomical world, and certainly in his own hometown, that he's given a professorship at Hobart College in 1900, where he remains until his death. And he became an incredible speaker. He brought astronomy to the public. This is one of his lectures. He brought astronomy to the public. Okay. He taught students in the Smith College Observatory, because in later years, Hobart Observatory had been torn down. So the Smith Observatory was the main observatory, and it was still on, all these buildings were still on the campus. Well, they became part of the campus of Hobart College. That since Hobart College has since taken these outlier buildings, sold them off. So now this property is in private hands and is no longer part of the college, but the college is basically right next door. This is Hobart College as we see it today, and this is Lake Geneva. Okay, the original observatory. What's that? Seneca. No, Lake Geneva. Seneca. Yeah, you're right, Seneca. Okay. Well, these are all Finger Lakes. The observatory used to be not too far away from the church there on the quadrangle there, but that's long since gone. Smith Observatory today. What does it look like today? I'm absolutely amazed, having visited a lot of these observatories that belong to prominent astronomers and even to universities, how fortunate we are, at least here in Rhode Island, that we're an astronomical society that has a facility like this that's maintained and is still functional and is still in good use. You go to a lot of Observatory and you see how the university has preserved that. You go to a lot of other prestigious universities and their observatories are either in disrepair, they've been torn down, replaced by parking lots. We're a rarity. This observatory in some ways breaks my heart because the Finger Lakes Astronomical Society, well, I better not say names. There's a large astronomical society. Can you edit that out, somebody? There's a large astronomical society in the area, and I spoke to the owners of the property, and they really can't get anybody to come and get interested and do any programs there. They come up on occasion. The building is not in great shape, but it's not in terrible shape, and we'll see that. And the only people that seem to take a great interest are people who come from far away and know something about the history of early astronomy. Well, there's a sign right on the main road that says Smith Observatory. This is after he left Red House Observatory, and Smith brought him. This is where he erected Smith Observatory. World famous for the discoveries of Dr. William Brooks. This is the house. Here is the observatory. This is a new addition. This was added later, okay? But this is the original house, all period inside. It's owned by, let me see, let me make sure I get her name. Trey Genovese and her partner and their 2 children. And her sister, I think, lives with them, and she's somewhat of an accomplished photographer. So on the day I got there, I said, well, I'm going to just take my chances and go there and see if I can at least take pictures from the outside. Well, when I got there, they were having a whole thing for the eclipse. And unfortunately, it fell apart because the weather was bad. But they had a little telephone number outside and says, tours of the observatory, call this number. So I called the number and I talked to the lady and I said, hi, my name is Richard up from Rhode Island and, you know, passing through eclipse, but we're now heading east to try and get the clear skies. I was wondering if it would be possible to come and take some pictures of the observatory. Oh, by all means, please do come by. We'd love to have you and everything else. And if you'd like to stay, you can help with our program and everything else. But I said, no, I gotta head east. Well, this is Trey Genovese and her sister, okay, and they were all set up for their eclipse tours and everything else. This is me and my wife, and we're holding the sign. And this is the observatory as you see it. It has a little, it has an ante-room, but it has a little transit room here where our transit was outside. Frank Seagrave's was on the outside, pretty much in the kind of the same position. Smith's Observatory is on the National Register of Historic Places. Okay, they have raised money, they have sold pictures, they have done things to try and do some upkeep to the building. But they haven't been able to get the support of the amateur community to come in and do anything to help preserve it. And I thought if we went out with a SWAT team, Steve, Al, Bob, we all went out with a SWAT team for a week and stood out there, that we could kind of fix the place up and maybe get them to let us take the telescope out and let Al take it home and fix it up. But you'll see why. Before he gets to John Briggs. This is the inside, which was Brooks's office. And you know, it's got a nice little display. They could use a little professional design and what have you. But basically it's in nice shape. And there are a lot of his original notebooks and everything in there. And most of his papers and his observations and his records are at Hobart College in the archives. But there is a nice display in there, and there is a lot of things, much like we have here, Frank Seagrave, some of the books and stuff that he used. This is the transit room, okay, and it's a Gotland transit, and he became, because he was the photographer in Phelps, he was really getting into photography, and he was doing photography through the telescope. I'll show you the camera. And he was also doing spectroscopic work where he was using a Browning spectroscope, which I think I have a close-up picture of. So he was one of the first people that was doing spectroscopy and was doing photography, but his primary interest was in photography of the comets. And he has quite a collection, which I did not have time to go see at Hobart College. This was his custom-made clock from England. I was a little tipsy when I took it. The building is actually more, a little flatter. And this is a close-up of the transit scope. So in this facility, it was a teaching facility, so he was also teaching everything about astronomy, not just the comet part was his passion that he did after hours in his own time, but he had to have a well-rounded course in astronomy. So the instruments and everything were used for every conceivable thing for training purposes. This is his camera. It was a box camera. This is the spectroscope. Okay, stuff is not well preserved, but it's not in horrible shape. And only now do I realize they're always looking to raise money. So the next time I go back, if I ever get back, I'm going to make an offer on this telescope. Okay, Steve, you know what it is? It's a Mogi.
Is it a movie?
It's a Mogi, but to give you an idea, you have this couple that's passionate about the history, but they don't know much about astronomy. So if you take a look here, the finder is put in backwards. Okay, it's equatorially mounted, but you've seen movies where they show telescopes with the equatorial mount, and the tubes are in all different positions.
Stick out through the slot.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick,
Yeah.
have you had a chance to show Mike Umbrick the transit room pictures and show him the transit scope?
From here?
No. Back,
No, I have not.
because I'm sure he would be very interested, being as how he was the guy instrumental in getting the transit room at Platt Observatory up and running again.
I'll do that through Bobby, but there are some nice paintings on canvas too, hanging up on the walls, but these are some of the instruments. But let's take a walk up the stairs. There's stairs where our anteroom is straight onto the cylinder and then straight up the stairs. They have a little bit of a winding staircase, but it's all this beautiful tongue and groove pine. You go up the stairs, and when you get to the top, here's the telescope. The telescope is in need of cleaning. The objective is covered. Okay, they have signs hanging, do not touch. But you could see the building needs a little bit of work, but most of all, like when I was at Peltier's observatory and he died, they couldn't close the dome. So for 20 years, the dome was left probably a foot wide and water would just flow in. That's a whole nother thing. But if you take a look here, the dome doesn't quite close. Okay, so they do get some water damage. They get a lot of snow. Okay, but that's something that I think we could fix very easily by just covering it until we figured it out. But once again, you could see, Steve, that it's interlocked just like our cannonballs were.
What did they drive the dome with? They had a similar thing with us with it.
They had a 2 horsepower motor or something. I'm not sure if I got a picture of it. This is the telescope. Once again, it's 10 1/4. It's got a fairly large finder. Warner and Swayze did the dome and they did the mount. And it's got nice setting circles, just like our Alvin clock, silver inlaid and everything else. Plus it's got a clock on it, and here's the crank. There's the governor, very similar to everything we have.
What's the date of this instrument?
This instrument, let me think about this. This instrument is 1758.
No.
1858.
Okay, so 10 years younger than ours.
Close up of the mount. Everybody was making Warner and Swayze, Fitz, Brashear, Alvin Clark. The mounts were all very, very similar. Not identical, but very, very similar. This is how the scope looks inside. And
Oh,
this,
there you go.
and there's a close-up. And this is where the drive goes down to the motor.
Oh, so instead of having a ship's wheel, they got a motor to drive.
Yeah, they're using a wheel, they're using like, a rubber wheel against not a rubber wheel, but something against the track to rotate it in circumference. This is a painting of Brooks Comet of 1911, okay, the position as it was going through the sky. So Brooks was, like I said, 22 comets, and in a period of 5 months, he discovered 3 comets, okay, which was a pretty amazing thing. And continued to collect money from our benefactor in Rochester. Well, this is the William Smith House, who was the philanthropist there. And it's now an inn, and it's right next to the observatory, and you can stay here. It's a bed and breakfast. I'm told it's very, very nice inside. And this shows you the house itself, okay? And the observatory is just over here, and his house is just over here. And Cometary Discoveries by William R. Brooks. These are a list of them. But if you looked here, it says compiled by John Bortle. John Bortle came, and he had first read about the Brooks, about Smith Observatory in Joe Ashbrook's book, okay, where he had an article about Smith and an article about Brooks and the observatory and all the common things. And it's a name a lot of people didn't really know, but it was compiled by John Bortle, and he named his observatory the W.R. Brooks Observatory because he's over in the eastern part of New York, and this is one of his fellow countrymen in New York, and he's not that well known, and he was so inspired when he had visited there, but he's too far away to be able to do anything on a regular basis. There was a little error here because when after John was there, it says A.R. Brooks Observatory, but it's actually W.R. Brooks Observatory, which is what John Bortle called his observatory. And for those of you who don't know, John Bortle is a very, very well-known comet observer, not discoverer, but he used to have Comet Digest and Sky and Telescope. He's the guy on observational of comets. Painting of Brooks in his final years, his health was good, but he was always pushing himself. And this is a part of New York that gets very cold in the wintertime. And he was observing one night, and I'm not sure if he was trying to photograph, but he was pushing himself on a very, very cold night. And it was affecting his health, which was already starting to fail. And he did this for a few more nights. And one night while observing, the cold and everything and his weakness overcame, and he fell in, and he injured himself pretty badly. And he was bedridden from that point on for about 2 or 3 months. He was bedridden. He was never able to get out of bed again. And he passed away in 1921. And this is his gravestone in the Glenwood Cemetery. And if you look here, when this was put up, this was just before, Stellarphane hadn't come into existence, and it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." So it's a common phrase that's been used from the Bible, and we see the telescope. And no, I'm sorry, there's a telescope, and then there's a little comet here and some stars, and he's buried with his wife. And it's the end. It's a wonderful story. If you put in W.R. Brooks and you go online and you read about him, it's a great inspiration. He wasn't a poor person that had to struggle, but he wasn't rich. But he was so passionate that he was able to make a living observing, and he was in the right place at the right time. And that's Comet Hans Brooks just before it left our sky. Thank you very much.